Good morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Pointe Blank 1 minute at a time. I am your co-host, Hugh.
And I am your other co-host, Dev. And on today's show, we're looking at 94, where Martin really loses Debbie as she kind of gives him a piece of her mind and storms out the door. And then, much more excitingly, we get another bit of Joan Cusack, which makes me very happy.
Joining us on today's show, as he has been all week, we have the wonderful Darren Husted of the T. Hanks for the Memories podcast. Welcome back.
Guys, the thing is, I don't know how you got this far in and neither of you realised that it's wrong. How can you never learn that it's wrong? Doing a podcast, I should say. Also murdering people. I
was a little worried that you were going to kick it off with just telling us emphatically that we don't get to have you, and then storming off the podcast, because I thought that might happen.
Yeah, I don't know. I like how we've kind of, over the week we've gradually come to the point where all the justifications for how you can murder people have just arrived at the point where Debbie's like it's just wrong. Have you not gotten? How has that not been a thing that's gotten through to you? That you just murdering people, it's just not right. And just her kind of impassioned, everything you say is a lie. So stay away from me. Obviously, we'll find out that there's an ironic twist coming up that means that's not going to be possible. But I get, it's a well-written script, isn't it? You put a line like that in, and obviously his intention is to stay away from her. But circumstances are going to force things. But yeah,
I kind of feel like if this conversation had happened right as he was about to leave, she would have been much more understanding of this concept of I mean, he wouldn't have actually executed on it yet, but she knows his background, she knows how he grew up. And I think if it wasn't for those 10 years of not seeing each other, that would be a lot fresher in her mind, and she might have more understanding of where he's coming from. She has the privilege to not have to worry about this. Just like, as you said, Hugh, she kind of represents America, right? America has the privilege of being able to kind of ignore veterans to a large extent, ignore the global conflicts that America gets itself involved in, outside of occasional news reports about how well America is doing.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go on.
She does pass this judgment, and it depending on how you look at it, it's either objectively correct on an individual basis. This is not okay to be doing. You're absolutely right. It kind of, in a way, it doesn't really matter what background you have. That's no excuse for this behavior. Regardless, we both went to the same high school. We both had instilled it as in an educational context. Morality and right and wrong. But at the same time, it is a supercilious tone. It is a judgment being passed on somebody who hasn't had to experience the same things, hasn't had that life.
But you see, this is where there's something quite interesting, I think, in the sense that if you go back to the kind of the start of the satirization of the John Hughes 80s teen comedy genre, right? You go back to Heathers, right? Daniel Waters, 88, 89. And, Christian Slater's character in that, deliberately done in a Jack Nicholson style that would, become his hallmark for quite a while. But the whole idea of, the girl falling in love with the guy who is the incel, who is the killer, who will take down the school. And she only becomes a hero by standing up to him and becoming herself. That never really comes back round again, right? That's like a really unique film that stands on its own. Director Michael Lemmon will never make another movie like it. Daniel Waters, who wrote it, will write more films that have a flavor of that, but none of them will be quite like that. And I feel like in the attempt to say to give Heather to give Veronica some a moral high ground in the context of that film, right, is very much buried between in a kind of, again, once again we come back to a western, right? He doesn't ride a horse, but he has a long coat, duster coat, and a motorbike and a gun, and goes around making sure to kill people because that's what he thinks is the right thing to do. Society is screwed. And I love that we fast forward by just under 10 years. And as you say, Debi is questioning all of that. I feel like, Darren, you said in a previous episode this week about the political correctness of the 90s. I mean, this is the Gen Xers going, no, this is not okay. You guys grew up on a fantasy of, rah rah America, and America, the policeman, foreign policy is speak softly and carry a big stick and all of that stuff. And now they're going, you know what, guys, this isn't right. None of this is right. And the proof of the pudding is the economic state that the film has constantly talked about. The fact that if all of this is meant to achieve a certain level of life and quality of life, actually it's failing at that. So I think, yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying, and you're right. It is slightly supercilious, but it is also nice to see in a film like that, because traditionally, what you see is something like, oh crikey, what's the Clint Eastwood one where he plays the training sergeant teaching the young bucks, and they end up going into whichever small Latin American island needed invading at the time. Oh, I can't even remember what it was called now. And one of the themes of that film is he's the boomer, he's the guy who's seen the action. You got all these young guys who are super hip. You got Mara Van Peebles, people like that, very street, and he knocks them into shape and makes them men and soldiers and responsible, right? And that's like the traditional Hollywood movie message for the Gen X. And then you get this film, and you're like, no, actually, it's different. Gen X are the ones who are going to call you out on it because they don't feel the same way. Because you've let them
that
down.
Heartbreak Ridge that you're thinking of?
That's it. Thank you. Heartbreak Ridge. That's the one.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I don't think he's even a boomer. He's
he's pre-boomer.
Greatest generation, isn't he?
Yeah, true. Except he didn't fight in the war.
No,
either war.
He became an actor.
Yeah.
Who pretended to fight in wars.
Well, at least he didn't do what Stallone did and go and hide in a girls' private school as a gym teacher instead of the draft.
Well, I'm not going to say people shouldn't dodge a draft. I mean, I can agree with that.
No, I'm just saying it's the irony of the man who played Rambo.
Yeah. Or I mean, the thing is, I'm sure that there's a very good Tropic Thunder style film to be made out of Clint Eastwood not becoming a soldier and becoming an actor instead.
Quite
the opposite of Jimmy Stewart, who went out there and killed people.
Yeah.
Traumatized him.
And Lee Marvin.
Yeah, this is it.
And Kennedy himself as a president.
The real men, rather than guys who talk to chairs.
But that's the whole thing, isn't it? Though I think I have more respect for someone like Lee Marvin, who did the real thing, then came back, and when he became an actor, totally undercut the machismo, right? With the original Point Blank, right? Point Blank that he's in, his character is there's a whole gay subtext going on in that film, but in addition to that, there's an emasculation that happens between him and Angie Dickinson that is very, very deliberately. I mean, John Borman will say this is it's nowhere to be found in Westlake's novel, but it's there in the film. And Borman said, I saw Borman do they did a remastered version print, and I saw it at the British Film Institute, and he was there in attendance, and he was saying, Marvin was completely up for it. Marvin was like, yeah, this, let's totally take the classic noir killer out for revenge, and we'll totally undercut him. And he did the same thing with his his gang leader in The Wild One, right? There's Marlon Brando being super macho, super restrained, and then you've got Lee Marvin absolutely clearly he loves the other guy. He loves him, and he makes it so clear. It's brilliant. It's wonderful to watch. And you're like, yeah, he understood it. He saw the violence, and he came back home, and he's like, yeah, that's not how I'm going to play it. So even though we always think of him as the tough guy from the Dirty Dozen and so forth, he there was a real streak of kind of yeah, this is not how we're supposed to be, guys. And I think that's what led to his drinking later on. But no, I think Cusack is. Yeah, I think Cusack's character is that he's that modern version. He's come back, and he's only. But the difference was he was in love with it first, and it's taken him till now to realize what's wrong.
I mean, having Minnie Driver in front of you will do that to you. Won't it?
Very
if you're
true.
there with this extremely beautiful brunette who's like, I don't like you killing, you're probably going to go, okay then. Like, I mean, it's the only thing I know how to do, and it's all I've been getting paid to do for the last 10 years. But yeah, let's I've lost my taste for it now. Now that I'm happy to see you, Amelia Fiona Driver, standing in front of me, let's call it a day on the murdering thing, and let's progress to kind of getting to know each other. But yeah, I mean, she obviously she's still angry. She walks out angry, and I think it's funny because this is in the rom-com structure. This is the point where they've had the disagreement, and generally the disagreement is you find out that your boyfriend happens to own a gigantic bookstore that's putting you out of business, rather than he's a person who goes around murdering people for money. Obviously, a different take on that whole thing,
but a lovely twist to that era.
Yeah. But I mean, let's get to the meat and potatoes of what we really want to talk about for this minute.
Well, I mean,
go ahead, Dev.
Before we get on to that, I think throughout this scene between John Cusack and Minnie Driver, it is some of the best acting of Minnie Driver, and she's phenomenal throughout this film. But you see that exact moment when she forces herself to stay away from me, and you see in her eyes her heart breaking as she does that, and after that it feels like everything John Cusack does, it just doesn't sell as well to me, and it's again it feels like that thing that we've mentioned in the past of the actresses in this film selling their parts because of their talent, and the actors in this film being able to ride a little bit off of the script. And this is one of those moments where it really feels like Minnie Driver is what really sells the emotion here. And John Cusack is almost back to kind of say anything John Cusack, I feel, with the don't go and the kind of innocent glossy eye staring thing that young John Cusack does so well. Although I do like him just kind of deflating once Debbie's left and kind of leaning his head up against the wall a little bit. But much more importantly, let's jump to John Cusack. I mean, first and foremost, we get to enjoy Joan Cusack spread across 2 minutes here, so we'll have plenty more Joan Cusack tomorrow. But in this minute, we've got Joan Cusack wildly slinging gasoline round whilst smoking a lit cigarette, which I think is the best look of anybody ever, although possibly the most likely to shorten your lifespan.
I mean, gasoline fumes aren't that flammable, are they? So she should be okay.
So famously, the thing they always do in the movies where you throw the lit match or lighter onto the gas and it goes up, doesn't happen. Supposedly, you actually have to what is it you have to do? You have to. Well, maybe we shouldn't talk about it in case it's imitable.
I think you have to keep it near it a lot longer. You have to it has to be more deliberate and more.
Yes.
So in many ways, this is bizarrely a more realistic depiction of how you can act around gasoline than in most films.
Yeah. Once there's enough gas there, she can then drop that. But it's it's almost like she's prepping, right? It's like Colonel Hannibal from the A-Team style, right?
Yeah. I kind of like the idea of Joan Cusack as Hannibal.
Colonel Hannibal. I love it. If we could get her in a film now,
like the Ghostbusters reboot where they did a gender swap. Just an A-Team reboot with a gender swap.
Oh, I'd watch the hell out of that.
I think that would be phenomenal.
That would be amazing. Oh dear. But yeah, Cusack, she's this is her scene through and through, right?
Yeah.
This is what we want from her.
Yeah, more fantastic costume choices here as well. This hot pink raincoat that is definitely not going to attract any notice as she leaves a presumably burning building. Yeah, just phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
I don't think the building will burn. I think it looks like it's a brick building, so it'll probably only be the office that burns.
I mean, sure, but like when there's smoke coming out of an office window and you're just nonchalantly leaving the building in a hot pink.
I mean, if she's nonchalant enough, people won't notice, will they? You know, like
a little bit of whistling, you know.
Yeah, just make it as casual as possible.
Distance. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think we've got more of her tomorrow, but I think like her just throwing the gasoline around and like it's funny because throughout the film she has been like, very kind of like, she's the admin, isn't she? She's just there doing the administration. So like she isn't as invested and in what's happening, apart from the fact that she's very invested. Given that it's her brother, it's a bit weird. But given, as characters, she's invested in his like private life and his romantic life, and she he doesn't care about killing people because he has the moral flexibility. It's just a job for him, and she doesn't care about the killing because like she only deals with the clients and whether or not they're happy or angry. And again, like for her, it's just a job. But then the whole reunion thing is like that's where she's like very invested in what's going on with Martin, is like whether if he's been to the reunion, who he's met, who he spoke to, like it's really funny to see this character who's like mostly all business be very, very concerned about someone's like love life and whether or not she's like talking to him or if they've gone out or like all of that stuff is like it's great stuff throughout the film. And I think the next minute is that that's the last we see of her in the film. This is
it is, yeah. And I think that to me is one of those things. I would have liked to have seen her meet up with Martin one last time, like another scene in person, because I mean we mentioned it at the time, but the scene in the start of the film is literally the only scene where the two of them are in a room together. Every other interaction is over phone. And I think that's a bit of a shame because I think that scene where they are face to face just is so phenomenal.
But the thing is, he has to leave her behind, right? She's been the main woman in his life, and he's moving on now. He's got to leave her behind. Like the goodbye, yeah. I mean, it's not supposed. I don't feel like it's supposed to happen person to person. This seems kind of the logical point because at this point he's not coming back. He's done with her, LA, that life.
Yeah, except I mean, this is that we've talked about how this is like the fantasy, right? And part of that fantasy is we'll get to it in tomorrow's minute, but he says I'll come find you, right?
Yeah.
Because he doesn't want to leave her behind, right?
Yeah. True.
I do also really want to know what they used for the gasoline because it's got a very slight brown tint to it. It seems a little bit thicker than water. It has a slightly gloopy aspect, which of course gasoline doesn't, right? Like gasoline's actually thinner than water, but it just visually on camera it works fantastically well as she's just slinging it about the screen.
I mean, it's the same thing of like, if you're going to shoot horses on film, you can't. You've got to shoot cows and paint them to look like horses because they don't show up as horses on film. So if you're going to shoot gasoline, you've got to use like vegetable oil or something to look like gasoline so that people can see.
Yeah.
Because if you're just throwing out this very thin liquid, it's not going to read on camera, is it? You need to really have something so you can see that there's been something through. Otherwise, she just looks like a crazy person, holding this canteen and throwing it around and nothing's coming out. So obviously they want to make it look a bit more. The irony is they want to make it more like realistic, but it, so it reads on camera rather than so it's accurate.
Yeah, it's the chocolate sauce in Night of the Living Dead, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's funny because like just like you say, the kind of the way that she's throwing it around, like we'll talk more about it in the next minute, but like I'm not fully convinced that this is gonna fully like get rid of everything. Like maybe it will because there's enough gas, but like it looks like she's only got like one small canister. Like she hasn't got like 3 jerry cans of like gigantic like gasoline that she's like pouring out. I don't know. I've never committed arson, I should say. But like it feels like there should be more, but at the same time, this is clearly like a rush thing, isn't it? Like last minute, he's quitting and she's got to get rid of everything. So she's probably just maybe bought the smallest amount of gasoline she can, so she doesn't want to arouse any suspicion.
I mean, it does feel like it is intended to not set the whole building on fire, right? Like all of the papers are piled up, ready to just go up. The computer is being taken care of. So yeah, maybe this is a controlled fire.
Yeah, controlled burn, as they say in the business.
Yeah. Tell me about it. All right. Has anybody got anything else for this minute?
No, I think we should save it for the next one.
Yeah, I was going to say I think we really get into things in the next minute, so let's do that one.
All right. Well, join us back again tomorrow, folks, for more Joan Cusack goodness. While Steph just fanboy, apparently. This was minute 94 of the Grosse Pointe Blank podcast, Debi Radio 79.5 FM, featuring your hosts, co-writers, and co-producers, Dev Sodiger and Hugh David.
Today's guest, Darren Houston from the T Hanks for the Memories podcast. Darren, if people do want to listen to the wonderful work you've done over the years, where can they find it?
Well, I mean, as we're talking about Joan Cusack, I think this is the appropriate point to kind of talk about T. Hanks, because she has been featured on a few episodes of that because she obviously is in Toy Story 2 and 3 and 4. So, and I think she probably will be in 5, coming up in the future. So, yeah. Weird because I'm sure those 3 films have made more than the entire filmography of her brother combined. So, things must be a little awkward around the Cusack family table at Thanksgiving when people are like, well, how many billion-dollar films have you starred in, John? I think it's 0, isn't it? Yeah. So listen to me talk about Joan on those because the weird thing about the Toy Story films, and I don't think, this is something I don't think people really notice. Like a lot of fuss is made over Buzz Lightyear, but after the first film, he like barely features. Like he's part of the plot and he's there, but he's literally just like a bit player. And if he wasn't voiced by Tim Allen, I don't think anybody would pay attention to that character after the first film. And Joan Cusack, like Jessie gets way more play in like the second and third films than Buzz Lightyear even does. It's like it's really weird, if you watch, and particularly the fourth film. You watch the fourth film and like Buzz Lightyear is barely a person in that. Like his character is nothing. It's kind of weird, but yeah. So listen to me talk about Joan Cusack on that podcast.
Fantastic, thank you. You can find us at all good podcast players, as well as on YouTube, X, and Spotify. In all cases, our handle is at Debi Radio, Debi Radio, and our website is also available for you to peruse. DebiRadio.com. One more time, that is Debi Radio.
And if you want to talk with us, you can join us on the Facebook listeners group, Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't a moment, it was a feeling.